Okay, we have just had some breaking news here that the Russia-Ukraine peace deal that President Trump was putting together has now fallen apart. And we're going to talk about a lot today. There's a lot to cover, not just from the Russia-Ukraine side, from the USA's involvement, or, well, we'll see if there is involvement. But there's also Australia. There's a lot of movement with Australia, China. So we're going to go through a lot today. I'll keep it as succinct as I possibly can. But NATO's top man there, and this is Mark Rutte, he's either on his way right now or he is planning to leave for the US because what's happened with this meeting, it's all fallen apart basically with Russia. And I want to talk about a couple of things that they say have contributed to this, which I don't really think is the case. One is Poland and the threat they made and things like that. We'll go through this with some logic and rationale. But I thought it was interesting that who does Mark Rutte go to see? Is he going to Brussels? Is he going to see Ursula von der Leyen? Is he going to see Starmer or any of the other people, Macron? No, he's flying from Europe to the USA for a meeting with President Trump. Now, this is quite telling. I want to know in the comments what you think is going on. I'm going to have a look at the comments as we go along here. But let me know what you think is actually going on with all of this, because I've got a few theories around it. And Trump is not happy. Let's just say that. I'll bring up a couple of the stories. He's not happy with this breakdown. And in effect, what he's saying was that there was just no movement. Russia were not willing to move, mainly on the Donbass areas, what the negotiations are over. Not willing to move. There's no change. There's no movement, no improvement. And Trump says he wants the killing to end. So instead, he's now calling Mark Rutte. Mark Rutte's coming in, and let's see what happens. But I want to know what you think is going to happen here. Now, let's begin with the first big one then, and that is we'll go on to, before we talk about Brussels, we'll talk about Poland. So this came out, I thought this was a very interesting article. Poland threatens to enforce arrest warrant if Putin flies through for the Trump summit. Now, I was reading through this article and I was going, okay, so how exactly are they going to do that? How are they going to arrest him? And it says that if he even attempts to fly through Polish airspace, they will arrest him. And I was thinking about that and going, hold on, how exactly would that work? He's in a plane. He's flying over Poland. How are they going to arrest him? I couldn't figure it out. I messaged my friend who's in the RAF. He's still in the RAF. He's been in for a long time. And I was like, hey, how could they arrest him if he's flying? And we were back and forth chatting on this. And in the end, he basically the answer is they can't. They would have to, he said, there's two options. Number one, jam the flight and make the equipment start to have problems and malfunction, so it had to land. Or two, you use fighter jets and you force the plane to land. But even then, he said, that would be it would be extremely difficult to do, and it would be an act of war from Poland against Russia. So in other words, it's not even possible to do it. So all this talk that they're talking about now, saying, oh, this is one of the reasons this all fell apart because Poland's taking this bold stance and they're going to arrest Putin. It makes no sense. It to me is a load of nonsense. So I'm going to throw the story that the media is running with at the moment out the way, because it doesn't make any sense at all. If you think it makes sense, please explain it to me so it does make sense, because it doesn't make any sense to me. Now, The Economist just did a post on what's happening in Brussels. It says, Brussels feels like a city preparing for war. Europe readies itself to survive in a world of hostile strongmen. And this main article then, they're saying battle lines for a new world order. This is from Ursula. Battle lines for a new world order based on power are being drawn right now. Ursula von der Leyen described a world in which dependencies are ruthlessly weaponized and in which many major powers are either ambivalent or openly hostile to Europe. She says we only start organizing when we are threatened. The threats are clear now, she said. The most urgent involve 3 strongmen who view Europe with either disdain or hostility. She named them. These are President Trump. She actually named him. I can't believe that. Putin and Xi Jinping of China. She said these are the ones who are the strongmen that we need to prepare for. It is the most bizarre speech, I think, imaginable, first of all. She said Brussels has come to a grim realization. War is raging on the European continent, in Ukraine, and none of those strong men is guided by anything resembling European values. We must prepare. This is just war talk all the time. Please let me know what you think, but it's just war talk. That's all I'm seeing, and it gets worse. I'm about to show you an article in a moment that happened on Saturday. So I'm recording this, streaming this now on Wednesday. What they said on Saturday was going, oh my goodness, there's no hope. There really isn't. Talking of preparation, I don't know if you saw my video the other day where I talked about these emergency life-saving sleeping bags as we're coming into the winter period here for Europe and the UK region and the US in effect. But there's a link below. You can actually get these, and the water straw, pure water straw. I told you all about it the other day, so I won't go into it all now. But I just got one here on my desk just to show you what it is. This will basically save your life. It's a water straw, super low cost, weighs nothing, and you can just keep this for your family, keep it in your car. I keep one in my car, keep one in my van. And this is the emergency sleeping bag that I told you about the other day. I won't open this up because I've got one open over there. But it, again, weighs nothing. It will save your life in winter. If you get caught in a storm or you lose power at home, anything like that, it's NASA developed. It reflects the heat back onto your body, or if you're out hiking, things like that. I always used to have these with me. Now, let's go on to the crazy story then. The link below for that is in the description. Here we go. So here's the first one. Then we'll talk about what they announced for Germany. So this was the Ukraine war briefing then. Storm Shadow missiles hit gunpowder plant in Russia. Now, this is big. This just happened. And this is why some of them are saying that Russia is pulling out and all this other, the peace talks fell apart. So again, I'm not buying that, but I'm just telling you what the media is saying. So these missiles then struck key industry in Russia for their weapons. They struck a chemical plant making gunpowder explosive and rocket fuel. And the reason I'm bringing this up, by the way, is because the Storm Shadows, also aka Scalps, these are British. It's a partnership with France. It's sort of British French missiles, and as a result of that, I know I'm jumping around today, but I've got to show you what is actually happening. As a result of that, this is, again, another thing we've seen today. Royal Navy destroyer intercepts Russian warship off the UK coast. And you've got to ask, why would a Russian warship be going through UK waters? Why is it sailing through UK waters? I think it's obvious. There is going to be payback at some point. This is the first time a Royal Navy warship has been tasked directly under the Alliance's direct command for such an operation, a Navy spokesman said. I love the way they've started going back to saying spokesman. You know, it used to say spokesperson and all this other stuff. We're going back to some normal language again. But yeah, the Russian Defense Ministry did confirm this attack. It blew up a lot of their key infrastructure there. So this was the Germany one. This was out of Bloomberg. This is Lagarde. Lagarde says, who, if you're not aware, she's the head of the ECB, European Central Bank. She says Germany is now an agent for change in Europe. So there was this massive thing on this. I'll just read some of the key points from the speech then. She praised Germany for finally opening its purse strings to spend on military and ramp up their military. She said fiscal policy let me just explain that. So you have monetary policy, which is central bank. Fiscal policy is government. Okay. So she said fiscal policy will play a more supportive role in the years ahead. She said this on Saturday in Washington. This is, of course, especially true for countries that are going to increase their defense investment. And this is certainly the case big way, good English there, by Germany, where major military and infrastructure investments are underway. She said these are just beginning to have an impact, but will be rolled out over the next 3 years in a very significant way. She encourages more countries in Europe to ramp up their military spending ready for Russia. Germany is using its balance sheet and its capacity to borrow, she said. Germany, an agent for change. Who would have thought it, Lagarde said. But it wasn't just her. Kristalina Georgieva, the head of the IMF, I think she's IMF, International Monetary Fund. She was on the panel as well, and she said, my message is this: bravo, bravo, bravo for Germany for ramping up their military spending. The next one then was, did you see this one? Europe steps up the plan for defense pact with Australia. So this was 3 days ago. This came out. Australia has stepped up its talks with the European Union on a defense pact that aims to counter threats. So that will be China for Australia, I guess, and it will be Russia for the EU, and build up military power on both sides, rising concerns about, Russia and China. Australian officials have been sent to Europe to discuss the terms of the partnership and clear the way for closer work on threats ranging from terrorism to drones, cyber attack, and, here it is, direct military force. So this is now Australia's getting involved, for all of my Australian viewers. She said, crucially for Australian defence companies, the partnership is an essential step before a country can take part in an EU military spending boost worth 150 billion euros, $270 billion. This is known as the SAFE for Europe, something like Security Action for Europe. Von der Leyen said she's also sealed agreements with Japan and South Korea. So again, that will be China, as they see a threat of China. This is what I don't get. Why does the European Union see China as a threat to them? It doesn't make any sense. There is really no threat to the EU of China, even though they keep ramping this up, the rhetoric. Has Australia got a threat? Probably, because they're going to get involved as a partner against China if this all kicks off. So that's really the connection here. The other one, Australia's just awarded a $10 billion contract to a Japanese company. But then you had all of these this week, which are quite key, quite crucial. You had the Chinese fighter jet threatens Australian warplane. Australia says Chinese fighter jet released flares in a dangerous incident. What about US and Australia? They've just signed the rare earth deal to counter China's dominance. Now, I thought it was interesting the way the BBC said that. Is that going to counter China's dominance? No. Australia does have good mining, and I've talked about that quite a few times before, talked about in some of the private stuff and things like that. Australia has good mining capacity. As long as their government actually allows the opening of mines, they're being very restrictive on some areas. But China is ahead by 20 years. I've shared with you many times before stories of when I was in the military, and I'd be on my own in some random part of Africa, and I say random part of the continent because it was different countries, and I'm in the Land Rover driving through, and I'd see some Chinese guys there, and you say, how do you know they're Chinese now? They all have those rice hats on, and I'd always be like, what on earth's going on here? And I'd always be curious, and then people would say to me, oh yeah, they're geologists or something, they're assessing this mountain for minerals and resources and all the other stuff. And 20 years ago, I didn't have a clue about a lot of this stuff, but I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then as time went by, I saw loads of these Chinese guys doing all the, these assessments of all these mountains. They are way ahead. So is Australia going to counter that? I don't think so. I just, the numbers don't say that, but it will definitely help. And the reason the US has got that deal fast, and they've got it now, is because it would cripple some of their military. The US military hardware is so advanced, and without these rare earth minerals and materials, as well as all the semiconductors and the chips and everything else, they would grind to a halt in some regards if they can't get the key things they need. So that's why the US got there first with this deal then. Albanese named 2 priority projects then in Australia. One was Alcoa. So if you've invested in either of these mines, you're up probably 150, 200% today. Alcoa and Arufura rare earths. So these are the ones that the government is injecting the capital into. And they also said this is a deal designed specifically for delivery to US and Australian buyers. We also had Sweden then. Sweden has come out and they've just said that they are pushing ahead with this new fighter program, again to counter Russia. Germany, Netherlands, they're spending $4 billion on these new Boxer-based fighting vehicles. So again, all of this has just come out in the last couple of days. We had, what was this one? Okay, this was out of France 24. European Union is to phase out Russian gas imports by the end of 2027. So the only 2 that are sort of holding them back are Hungary and Slovakia. So they said they've got a plan for Hungary and Slovakia here. So what exactly that plan is, goodness me, who knows exactly what they're going to do. But I said I was doing some research on something for you, and it's still ongoing, but it looks as though, and I'll give you a hint of this now so you're not waiting again, it looks as though what I talked about several years ago with the EU removing, by the way, if you're not subscribed, with the EU trying to remove voting rights of certain countries, it looks as though that could be happening. That is very likely going to be taking place. They're doing some sort of final stages of that. And I think that's how they could force Slovakia and Hungary to do it. There's also talk, and again, it's unconfirmed, so I'm just putting it out there, that they are going to veto Hungary and take another vote on Ukraine joining the EU. Not NATO at this stage, but the EU, as a gateway to NATO membership. Again, doesn't matter where you sit on this whole conflict, even most of the sort of top analysts say that is a terrible move. That is a really, really bad move for that to take place. On both sides, people say that. So why exactly that's taking place, I can't tell you, but I think the EU is trying to bring Ukraine in, and with all their spending, they're not spending all this money. Okay, so I've got a couple of theories. They're not spending all this money for nothing, for all of this equipment, for all this war ramping up. If they're going to have it, they're going to use it. And that would be a sort of segue. Remember the other thing I said as well, is that the EU is dying in terms of its GDP, the birth rate's collapsing. There's all sorts of major issue, mass migration. What would be the perfect excuse for them to recover? A war, a big war. So I've got a couple of theories on it. That is the main one that I think I'll run with at the minute. Remember these. Super low cost, link in the description. Thanks for being a subscriber here. Take care. God bless. And this will be the last video from the studio for a long while as we go to set up in the apartment in Bangkok. So I'll see you very soon. Bye for now. God bless.